In a quiet town nestled just outside Atlanta, Georgia, life moved at a steady pace. The streets were lined with modest homes and small businesses, and the community prided itself on its close-knit feel. Among the residents was Officer Daniel Harper, a man who had spent nearly 2 decades wearing the badge. To many, he was a symbol of authority, a figure people respected, even if they didn't always agree with his methods. But behind the uniform, Harper carried an air of superiority that often made others uncomfortable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Harper sat in his patrol car sipping coffee. His shift was winding down, but he still had a few hours left to patrol the area. As he drove through one of the quieter neighborhoods, something caught his eye: a sleek black sedan speeding slightly above the limit. Without hesitation, Harper flicked on his flashing lights and signaled for the driver to pull over. The car came to a smooth stop by the curb, and Harper approached it cautiously. Behind the wheel sat Mia Thompson, a young black woman dressed in professional attire. Her expression was calm, though her eyes betrayed a hint of surprise. Harper tapped on her window, and she rolled it down politely. "License and registration, please," Harper said gruffly, peering into the car. Mia nodded and reached into her glove compartment. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her tone measured and respectful. "You were going 10 miles over the speed limit," Harper replied curtly, taking the documents from her hand. He glanced at them briefly before stepping back toward his cruiser to run her information. While waiting, Mia couldn't help but feel uneasy. She hadn't been driving recklessly or breaking any major laws, just a minor infraction. Still, she reminded herself to stay composed. These situations could escalate quickly, especially for someone like her. Growing up, she'd heard stories about how encounters with law enforcement sometimes turned sour for black individuals. She hoped this wouldn't be one of those times. A few minutes later, Harper returned to her window. Instead of handing back her papers, he leaned against the doorframe, his demeanor shifting. "So where are you coming from tonight, Ms. Thompson?" he asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "I was visiting a friend," Mia answered calmly. "Why do you ask?" Harper narrowed his eyes slightly. "This is a nice car for someone your age. How'd you afford it?" Mia blinked, taken aback by the question. It wasn't illegal to drive an expensive vehicle, nor was it unusual for someone successful to own one. She worked hard as an attorney and earned every penny she spent. But instead of addressing her confusion, Harper pressed further. "You lawyers think you're above the law, don't you?" he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Mia to hear. Now Mia felt her patience waning. She kept her voice steady but firm. "I'm not sure what you mean by that, officer. I've done nothing wrong here." "Oh, really?" Harper shot back, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Then why did you speed? Trying to show off that fancy car of yours?" Mia clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to argue. She knew better than to let him rattle her. "If I was speeding, then issue me a ticket. I'll pay it. But I don't appreciate being interrogated like I've committed a crime." Harper smirked, clearly unimpressed by her response. "You've got quite the attitude for someone in your position." "My position?" Mia echoed, raising an eyebrow. "And what exactly is my position, officer?" Before Harper could answer, another car passed by slowly, its occupants glancing curiously at the scene unfolding. Harper straightened up, visibly annoyed by the attention. He decided to wrap things up, but not without making his point. "Here's your ticket," he said, thrusting the slip of paper into her hands. "Next time, try following the rules." As Harper walked back to his cruiser, Mia exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. She watched him drive away, the red and blue lights fading into the distance. For a moment, she considered letting it go. It was just a traffic stop after all. But something about Harper's behavior gnawed at her. The way he spoke to her, the baseless accusations, the thinly veiled disrespect. It all felt too familiar, and Mia knew she couldn't ignore it. Little did Harper realize, this seemingly routine traffic stop would set off a chain of events neither of them could have anticipated. What started as a mundane evening on patrol would soon spiral into a confrontation that would challenge everything Harper believed about his role as a police officer and expose the cracks in a system long overdue for change. The traffic stop might have ended there, with Mia driving off in frustration and Harper returning to his routine patrol. But fate had other plans. As Mia sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, she replayed the interaction in her mind. The way Harper spoke to her, his tone, his choice of words, it wasn't just rude, it felt like an attack on her very identity. She had dealt with prejudice before, both subtle and overt, but this encounter left a bitter taste in her mouth. Mia decided she wouldn't let it slide. Sitting in her car, she pulled out her phone and began typing up notes about the incident. She documented everything, what Harper said, how he acted, and even the look on his face when he questioned her about her car. She knew better than most people that evidence mattered, especially when it came to holding law enforcement accountable. Before starting her car again, she sent a quick text to her close friend and colleague, Sarah, who was also a lawyer. "Something happened tonight," Mia wrote. "I'll tell you more tomorrow." Meanwhile, Officer Harper was back on the road, feeling smug about how he handled the situation. In his mind, Mia had been disrespectful, and he'd put her in her place. He didn't think twice about the implications of his behavior or the fact that he had treated her differently because of who she was. To him, it was just another day on the job, but things took a turn later that evening. While patrolling near the outskirts of town, Harper noticed a group of teenagers hanging around a park after hours. They weren't causing trouble, but Harper saw an opportunity to assert his authority. He stepped out of his cruiser and approached them, his flashlight cutting through the dimly lit area. One of the teens, a young black boy, made eye contact with Harper and smirked nervously. That small gesture set Harper off. "What's so funny?" Harper barked, stepping closer. The teen stammered, trying to explain that he hadn't meant anything by it. But Harper wasn't having it. Within minutes, the situation escalated. Harper accused the boy of resisting orders and attempted to handcuff him. The other teens protested, shouting that their friend hadn't done anything wrong. A crowd began to gather, including some adults walking their dogs nearby. Someone started recording the commotion on their phone. Back at home, Mia couldn't shake off the events of the night. She scrolled through social media absent-mindedly, half expecting to see something about her own traffic stop. Instead, she stumbled upon a live video feed of Harper arresting the teenager in the park. The footage showed Harper yelling at the boy, shoving him roughly into the backseat of the cruiser. Comments poured in from viewers, many of whom recognized Harper from previous incidents involving excessive force. Mia watched in disbelief as the comments section lit up with outrage. "This guy again?" one commenter wrote. "He's always targeting black kids. I've seen this cop before," another added. "He's got a reputation for being a bully." Mia felt a surge of anger mixed with determination. This wasn't just about her anymore. Harper's actions were part of a larger pattern, one that needed to be exposed. She decided to dig deeper. Early the next morning, she visited the local courthouse and requested access to public records related to Harper's conduct. What she found shocked her. Over the years, multiple complaints had been filed against him for racial profiling, verbal abuse, and unnecessary aggression. Yet none of these complaints had resulted in disciplinary action. It seemed as though Harper operated with impunity, shielded by a system that turned a blind eye to his misconduct. Armed with this information, Mia reached out to Sarah. Together, they devised a plan. They would file a formal complaint against Harper, not just for the traffic stop, but for his history of discriminatory behavior. More importantly, they would use the viral video of the park incident to draw attention to the broader issue of police accountability. Mia knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. It rarely was when challenging those in power, but she was prepared to fight. Word spread quickly within the community. Local activists rallied behind Mia, organizing protests outside the police station. Signs reading "Justice for All" and "End Police Brutality" filled the streets. News outlets picked up the story, turning Mia's personal experience into a national conversation about systemic racism and law enforcement reform. People, from all walks of life shared their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of officers like Harper. For the first time in years, the town buzzed with energy, not just anger but hope for change. Harper, however, remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. When questioned by his superiors about the park incident, he defended his actions, claiming he was simply doing his job. He dismissed the growing backlash as overblown and politically motivated. But deep down, a flicker of doubt crept in. Why was everyone suddenly so interested in his work? Wasn't he just enforcing the law? As the days passed, pressure mounted on the police department to address the allegations against Harper. Internal Affairs launched an investigation, interviewing witnesses, reviewing body cam footage, and examining past complaints. Meanwhile, Mia continued to build her case. She reached out to civil rights organizations, seeking guidance and support. Lawyers specializing in police misconduct cases offered to join her team, lending their expertise to ensure Harper faced consequences for his actions. Despite the mounting scrutiny, Harper refused to back down. During a press conference organized by the police chief, he stood confidently beside his colleagues, insisting that he had done nothing wrong. "I treat everyone equally," he declared, looking directly into the cameras. "If people can't follow the rules, then they have no one to blame but themselves." His words only fueled the fire. Protesters grew louder, demanding transparency and accountability. Even some of Harper's fellow officers began distancing themselves from him, wary of being associated with someone embroiled in such controversy. The once unshakable officer now found himself isolated, his reputation crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. For Mia, the journey was far from over. While she welcomed the support pouring in from across the country, she understood that true justice required more than headlines and hashtags. It demanded systemic change, changes in policy, training, and culture within law enforcement agencies. She vowed to keep pushing forward, using her legal expertise to hold Harper accountable while advocating for reforms that would prevent similar incidents in the future. What started as a simple traffic stop had transformed into something much bigger, a movement driven by courage, resilience, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. And as Mia stood alongside her supporters, ready to take on the system, she knew this was only the beginning. The momentum around Mia's case continued to build, fueled by the viral video of Harper's behavior in the park and the growing public outcry. What had started as a personal grievance was now a rallying cry for justice, drawing attention from all corners of society. People who had never met Mia felt connected to her story because it resonated with their own experiences, or the experiences of loved ones, of being treated unfairly by those in positions of power. In the days following the park incident, the video gained millions of views online. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like Justice for Mia and Hold Them Accountable. Celebrities, activists, and even politicians weighed in, amplifying the message that systemic racism within law enforcement needed to be addressed. The footage itself was damning. Harper's aggressive tone, his rough handling of the teenager, and the fear etched on the boy's face were impossible to ignore. Comment sections overflowed with outrage, but also solidarity. Strangers shared their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of police officers, creating a digital archive of pain and resilience. One particularly powerful moment came when a local high school student posted a thread on Twitter detailing how Harper had once stopped him while he was walking home from basketball practice. According to the teen, Harper accused him of carrying stolen goods simply because he had a backpack full of sports gear. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," the boy wrote, "but I still remember shaking so hard I could barely speak." His words struck a chord, inspiring others to come forward with similar accounts. Each story added another layer to the narrative, painting a vivid picture of how pervasive the problem was. Meanwhile, Mia worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with her legal team and community leaders to ensure the movement stayed focused and effective. She knew that anger alone wouldn't bring about change. It needed direction. So she organized town hall meetings where residents could voice their concerns directly to city officials. These gatherings became safe spaces for people to share their frustrations, fears, and hopes for the future. At one such meeting, an elderly woman stood up and spoke through tears about how her grandson had been racially profiled during a routine traffic stop years ago. Her voice trembled, but her resolve was clear. "We've waited too long for this," she said. "It's time for things to change." Harper, meanwhile, remained defiant. He gave interviews to local news outlets, doubling down on his claim that he was being unfairly targeted. "People are twisting my words," he told one reporter. "I'm not perfect, but I'm not racist. I treat everyone the same way, whether they're black, white, or any other race." But his attempts to defend himself only deepened the divide. Clips of his interviews were shared widely online, often accompanied by sarcastic captions pointing out the contradictions in his statements. For every person who defended him, there seemed to be 10 more calling for accountability. As the pressure mounted, the police department announced plans to hold a formal hearing to address the allegations against Harper. This decision was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a step in the right direction, while others remained skeptical, fearing it would amount to little more than a PR stunt. Mia made it clear that she wouldn't settle for empty promises. "We need real consequences," she said, during a press conference, "not just lip service." The anticipation leading up to the hearing was palpable. Local news stations provided round-the-clock coverage, dissecting every detail and speculating about possible outcomes. Activists set up makeshift memorials outside the courthouse, adorned with flowers, candles, and handwritten notes expressing support for Mia and the broader cause. One sign read, "Accountability is not revenge, it's justice." On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Rows of supporters sat shoulder to shoulder, their presence a testament to the widespread impact of Mia's fight. Reporters lined the back of the room, notebooks and cameras ready to capture every moment. Harper arrived flanked by his lawyer and several colleagues from the police force, his expression stoic but tense. When Mia entered, the crowd erupted into applause, which Judge Eleanor Simmons quickly silenced with a sharp rap of her gavel. The proceedings began with opening statements. Harper's attorney argued that his client was simply enforcing the law, and that the accusations against him were exaggerated. He portrayed Harper as a dedicated officer who had served the community for nearly 2 decades without serious incident. "Yes, he may have made mistakes," the lawyer conceded. "But does that mean we throw away everything he's done for this town?" Mia's legal team countered with a compelling argument, presenting evidence of Harper's pattern of misconduct. They highlighted past complaints, witness testimonies, and expert analyses of body cam footage showing instances of excessive force. One particularly striking piece of evidence was a recording of a 911 call made by a bystander during the park incident. In it, the caller described Harper as out of control and expressed fear for the teenager's safety. The audio sent murmurs rippling through the courtroom. Throughout the hearing, Mia sat quietly, her posture upright but relaxed. She exuded confidence, yet there was a softness in her eyes, a reminder that this fight was deeply personal. Every time Harper's lawyer tried to discredit her claims, she leaned closer to her team, jotting down notes and strategizing her next move. Though she rarely spoke, her presence commanded respect. It was as if the entire room understood the weight of what she represented, not just herself, but countless others who had been denied justice. By the end of the day, it was clear that the hearing had shifted the narrative. Harper's carefully constructed image as a no-nonsense cop was crumbling under the weight of undeniable facts. Even some of his staunchest defenders began questioning whether they had misjudged him. Outside the courthouse, protesters chanted, "No justice, no peace." Their voices echoed through the streets, a reminder that this wasn't just about one officer. It was about dismantling a system that allowed abuse of power to go unchecked. As the sun set on the first day of the hearing, Mia took a moment to reflect. Standing on the courthouse steps surrounded by supporters, she felt a mix of emotions: pride in how far they'd come, gratitude for the allies who had joined her cause, and determination to see it through to the end. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Together they were sending a powerful message: enough was enough. As the hearing stretched into its second day, tensions inside the courtroom reached a boiling point. The air was thick with anticipation, and every word spoken seemed to carry immense weight. For Mia, this wasn't just another legal battle, it was personal. Every piece of evidence presented, every testimony given, felt like a step closer to justice not only for herself but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly by someone like Harper. Mia's legal team had spent countless hours preparing for this moment. They knew they needed to present an airtight case if they wanted to hold Harper accountable. Their strategy was simple yet effective. Expose his behavior as part of a larger pattern of misconduct while humanizing the victims he had wronged. To do this, they called on several witnesses, including people who had filed complaints against Harper in the past. One after another, these individuals took the stand, sharing their stories with raw honesty. The first witness was Marcus Johnson, a middle-aged man who owned a small auto repair shop in town. Marcus recounted how Harper had pulled him over late one night, accusing him of driving a stolen vehicle simply because it was an expensive model. He didn't even check the registration, Marcus explained, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. He just assumed I couldn't afford something like that. Marcus went on to describe how Harper mocked him during the stop, making comments about his clothes and the neighborhood where he lived. The jury listened intently, their expressions softening as they absorbed the details of his experience. Next up was Lisa Bennett, a single mother who had been stopped by Harper while walking her dog near the park. She described how he questioned her presence in the area, implying she didn't belong there. "I've lived in this town my whole life," Lisa said, her voice trembling slightly, "but he made me feel like an outsider in my own community." Her testimony struck a chord with many in the courtroom, especially when she revealed that her teenage son had also been harassed by Harper during a separate incident. "It's exhausting," she admitted. "You start to wonder if you'll ever be seen as equal." Each story added another layer to the portrait of Harper as someone who abused his authority. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from the teenager involved in the park incident. Nervously clutching a glass of water, 16-year-old Jamal Carter recounted the events of that night. He spoke softly at first, his eyes darting around the room as though searching for reassurance. But as he continued, his confidence grew. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," Jamal said firmly. "I was just hanging out with my friends. Then, Officer Harper showed up and started yelling at us for no reason." Jamal paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "When he grabbed me, I thought, I don't know what I thought. Maybe that I'd done something wrong even though I hadn't. Or maybe that he could hurt me and no one would care." His words hung heavy in the air, leaving an undeniable impact. Several jurors exchanged glances, visibly moved by the vulnerability in his voice. Harper's lawyer did his best to discredit the witnesses, questioning their credibility and suggesting they were exaggerating or lying. But Mia's team anticipated this tactic and countered with meticulous documentation. They presented records of previous complaints, body cam footage, and expert analysis showing patterns in Harper's behavior. Each rebuttal chipped away at Harper's defense, exposing cracks in his carefully constructed narrative. Outside the courtroom, the atmosphere remained charged. Protesters gathered daily, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding accountability. Local activists set up tables offering free coffee and snacks to those attending the trial, turning the courthouse steps into a hub of community solidarity. Journalists camped out nearby, eager to capture any updates. It was impossible to ignore the growing sense that this case represented something much bigger than one officer's actions. It symbolized the fight against systemic injustice. For Mia, the pressure was immense. She barely slept, spending long nights reviewing documents and strategically planning her next moves. Yet she refused to let fatigue dull her focus. During breaks in the hearing, she huddled with her legal team, discussing strategies and fine-tuning arguments. Sarah, her closest friend and colleague, stayed by her side throughout, offering both professional advice and emotional support. "You're doing amazing," Sarah whispered during one particularly grueling session. "Just keep going." Despite the mounting evidence against him, Harper remained unrepentant. When called to testify, he defended his actions with unwavering conviction. "I'm not perfect," he admitted under cross-examination, "but I believe I acted appropriately in every situation." His answers often came across as rehearsed, lacking the authenticity needed to sway the jury. Even some of his fellow officers sitting quietly in the gallery appeared uncomfortable with his responses. Mia watched Harper closely as he spoke, studying his demeanor and tone. There was something almost mechanical about the way he delivered his lines, as though he believed repeating them enough times would make them true. It reminded her why she had pursued this fight in the first place. Not just to hold Harper accountable, but to challenge the mindset that allowed such behavior to persist. By the end of the second day, it was clear that the tide was turning. The prosecution had built a compelling case, weaving together individual stories into a broader narrative of systemic abuse. The defense, meanwhile, struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. As the final gavel fell, signaling the adjournment, until the next morning, Mia felt a flicker of hope. She knew the road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time she allowed herself to believe that victory might be within reach. That evening, surrounded by supporters at a nearby cafe, Mia reflected on everything they had accomplished so far. People shared stories of how the movement had inspired them to speak out against injustices in their own lives. A young woman tearfully thanked Mia for giving her the courage to file a complaint against a teacher who had discriminated against her. An older man praised her for shining a light on issues he had long thought were ignored. These moments reinforced what Mia already knew. This fight wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who yearned for fairness and equality. As the group dispersed, Mia stood outside the cafe looking up at the stars. The journey was far from over, but she felt stronger than ever. With each passing day, more people joined the cause, united by the belief that change was possible. And though the outcome of the trial remained uncertain, one thing was clear. No matter what happened, Mia's efforts had sparked a conversation that would continue long after the verdict was announced. The third day of the hearing began with a palpable shift in energy. The courtroom was quieter than usual, as if everyone sensed that the proceedings were reaching a critical juncture. Today would be the day Officer Daniel Harper took the stand to testify in his own defense. For Mia and her legal team, this was the moment they had been preparing for, a chance to confront Harper directly and expose the flaws in his version of events. Harper walked to the witness stand with an air of confidence, adjusting his tie before sitting down. His lawyer guided him through initial questions designed to humanize him, painting a picture of a dedicated officer who cared deeply about his community. Harper spoke about his early days on the force, recalling how he joined the police department because he wanted to make a difference. "I've always tried to do what's right," he said, his voice steady. "It's not easy being a cop these days, but I believe in protecting people." At first glance, Harper seemed sincere. He smiled faintly when talking about his family, and shared anecdotes about helping residents during emergencies. Some jurors nodded along, clearly affected by his words. But Mia remained unfazed. She knew better than anyone that appearances could be deceiving. As Harper's testimony continued, she leaned forward slightly in her seat, ready to pounce on any inconsistencies or contradictions. When it was Mia's turn to cross-examine Harper, the atmosphere in the room changed dramatically. Her presence alone commanded attention, and as she rose from her chair, the courtroom fell silent. She approached the podium slowly, her eyes locked on Harper's. There was no malice in her gaze, just determination. Taking a deep breath, she began. "Officer Harper," Mia started, her tone calm but firm. "You mentioned earlier that you joined the police force because you wanted to protect people. Is that correct?" "Yes," Harper replied, nodding confidently. "And yet," Mia continued, "we've heard testimony from multiple individuals who say you treated them with hostility and disrespect. Can you explain why that is?" Harper hesitated for a fraction of a second, but quickly recovered. "I treat everyone the same way, fairly and professionally. If someone perceives my actions differently, that's their interpretation, not mine." Mia nodded thoughtfully, letting his answer hang in the air for a moment before moving on. Let's talk about the night of the park incident. You arrested a 16-year-old boy for allegedly resisting your orders. Did you consider that he might have been scared? That your aggressive tone could have intimidated him? He wasn't following instructions, Harper shot back, his tone sharper now. My job is to maintain order, not coddle teenagers. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, and Judge Simmons raised her hand to silence the crowd. Mia didn't flinch. Instead, she pressed further. So fear doesn't factor into your decision-making process? You don't think about how your actions might affect someone emotionally or psychologically? I'm not a therapist, Harper retorted, his patience visibly wearing thin. I'm a police officer. My priority is safety. Mia paused, allowing his words to sink in. Then, with precision, she moved on to the traffic stop involving herself. Now, let's discuss our encounter. You questioned me about my car, implying that I shouldn't own something so expensive. Why did you feel the need to comment on my financial status? Harper shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I was curious, that's all. Curious, Mia repeated, raising an eyebrow. Or skeptical because of my race? That's ridiculous, Harper snapped, his composure slipping. I don't see color. I enforce the law equally. Mia allowed herself a small smile. This was exactly the kind of response she had hoped for, a defensive reaction that revealed cracks in his facade. If you truly don't see color, Officer Harper, then why did you mock my profession? Why did you imply that lawyers are above the law? Harper clenched his jaw, realizing too late that he had walked into a trap. I didn't mean anything by it, he muttered. But you did say it, didn't you? Mia pressed. You told me I thought I was above the law. Those were your exact words. Yes, Harper admitted reluctantly, his voice barely audible. And when you made those comments, were you aware that they could be perceived as disrespectful, or even discriminatory? I guess some people might take it that way. Harper stammered, his earlier bravado fading rapidly. Mia stepped away from the podium briefly, glancing at the jury. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to outright frustration. She turned, back to Harper, her tone softening slightly. Officer Harper, do you understand why accountability matters? Do you realize that your words and actions carry weight, not just for the individuals you interact with, but for the entire community? Harper opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time, he looked unsure of himself. It was clear that Mia's questions had struck a nerve, forcing him to confront the consequences of his behavior. As the cross-examination drew to a close, Mia delivered one final blow. Holding up a document, she asked, Are you familiar with this record of complaints filed against you over the years? Complaints alleging racial profiling, verbal abuse, and excessive force? Harper glanced at the paper, his face reddening. Yes, he admitted grudgingly. Yet despite these allegations, you've faced no disciplinary action until now. Does that concern you? Doesn't it suggest that there may be systemic issues within the department that allow officers like yourself to act without consequence? Harper stared at her, speechless. His lawyer jumped in, objecting to the question, but the damage was done. The jury exchanged knowing looks, and even some of Harper's colleagues in the gallery shifted uncomfortably in their seats. When Mia finally returned to her seat, the courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. Supporters exchanged hopeful smiles, while others whispered about how effectively Mia had dismantled Harper's defenses. For her part, Mia felt a surge of satisfaction, but she also knew the fight wasn't over yet. Convincing the jury was only half the battle. Ensuring that justice was served required vigilance until the very end. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in cheers when news of Harper's shaky testimony spread. Protesters held signs reading, "Truth prevails," and "Justice delayed is justice denied." Journalists scrambled to capture reactions from attendees, many of whom praised Mia for her poise and skill under pressure. One woman, holding a megaphone, led the group in chants of "Hold them accountable." Back inside, the hearing concluded for the day, leaving everyone eager for what lay ahead. As Mia packed up her papers and prepared to leave, Sarah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You crushed it today, she said with a grin. He didn't know what hit him. Mia smiled faintly, though exhaustion lingered in her eyes. We're not done yet, she reminded her friend. But today was a good start. That evening, Mia found solace in the support of her community. Friends and allies gathered at her home, bringing food and offering words of encouragement. They celebrated the progress made so far, but also acknowledged the work still needed to achieve lasting change. As Mia sat among them, listening to stories of resilience and hope, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about creating a world where everyone could live without fear of discrimination or abuse. With each passing day, the movement grew stronger, fueled by courage and collective determination. And though the outcome of the trial remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Mia's fight had ignited a spark that would continue to burn brightly long after the verdict was announced.